Ghost Hunter, you play as a wisecracking cop known as Lazarus, whose brainless meddling puts everyone in danger from supernatural forces. It all begins with you and your female partner showing up at an abandoned high school after a distress call, with the pair searching the location and coming across a mysterious underground lab filled with tanks of an unknown substance. Of course, Lazarus fucks around with the equipment, and it turns out that the tanks were full of ghosts. This is where the adventure picks up, and you set out to single-handedly put things back to how they were. It's essentially a third-person shooter with several survival horror elements mixed in. It's kind of like Ghostbusters in the way you go about recapturing the ghosts. You shoot a specialized weapon at an enemy to weaken it, and then throw a trap at it, which it then gets sucked into once it's weakened enough. This trap is multifunctional. It displays your foe's physical and spiritual energy levels to give you a chance to know which type of weapon is causing the most damage, and it returns to you once the ghost is captured. Now, one feature is a cover system that unfortunately comes across quite useless. It is painfully unintuitive and could have done with being streamlined a bit more to make it a bit more viable as a meaningful option. Visually, the game looks fantastic. It's one of the PS2 games with progressive scan, so it's all high-res goodness. Each shot, special effect and character model all look crisp and animate fluidly. If you're on the lookout to add something new to your collection, Ghost Hunter is well worth picking up and giving a go for yourself. When it comes to shooters, the PlayStation 2 played host to a wide selection of experiences that no doubt satisfied fans of the genre. But like most consoles, many games went by unnoticed, and one of those was Slippy: The Lost Planet. It's easy to see why, as many criticized the game for not having enough depth, for being repetitive, for being too simple, and for being all flash and no substance. Now, when you first begin a stage, you are asked to choose from any available weapons. You can mount one on the ship's left side and another on its right. In the first stage, you only have two choices: the straightforward Vulcan shot or a variant that fires shots to the diagonal left and right. Complete the stage and you will gain a laser shot and also napalm that branches off in angles from your side. And so it goes as you gain a weapon or two for each area conquered. The weapons are both the game's blessing and its curse. On the one hand, you have a neat system where you can choose to fire the left gun, the right gun, or both at the same time. Of course, critics will point out that any pluses the game may gain are cancelled out by the disappointing fact that the weapons are either all too similar or next to useless. The white beam, for example, seems destined to leave you exposed to enemy fire no matter how you use it. The energy ball that you get as your final weapon seems absolutely worthless, and most of the other items are just variants of the Vulcan. In all honesty, the saving grace of the entire game has to be the incredible boss encounters. They are all meticulously designed, both visually and mechanically, which soon steal the show. If you're all about the challenge, you won't find that here with Slippy, as it can be quite easy when compared to others on the market, but if you're looking for something simple to pick up and play, it is a solid choice. Crimson Sea began life on the original Xbox, but after some pretty poor sales, the decision was made to make the sequel exclusively for the PlayStation 2. Now, the narrative is pretty run-of-the-mill and centers around two warring factions and the survival of the human race. One faction, known as the Menace, possess something known as the Viper Wave, which grants its user the ability to accelerate their evolution. Luckily, our band of heroes have access to this same ability, which forms the basis of the gameplay. At its core, Crimson Sea 2 is an action shooter that gives the player many options when it comes to taking on the enemy. By default, you have two guns, a shotgun-like rifle called Legion and a machine gun called Vulcan. Both have ups and downs. Vulcan, although fast and great at combos, doesn't do much damage because of the high rate of fire, but the upside is you can move while firing. Now, Legion on the other hand is slower, but so much stronger. You can't really do any combos with it, but the pure strength alone is great to use for clearing out groups and a single tough enemy alike. Each of them have infinite ammo, but they will overheat or run out of a clip, at which point the ammo bar will fill back up to full in a couple of seconds. On top of this, you can also use the extensive melee options, which are carried out by a weapon known as Chronos, giving you incredible reach in attacking enemies, but it is a little slow in certain attacks. You'll often find yourself mixing up the gunplay with short flurries of melee attacks, which soon becomes one of the most rewarding ways to play the game. The more enemies you take down, the more experience points you earn, which contribute to not only your character's proficiency, such as extra health, but also the individual weapons as well. If you're looking for a challenging and more importantly satisfying experience, Crimson Sea 2 is a great option. The PlayStation 2 was home to a diverse set of fighting games that managed to push the genre forward in many meaningful ways. From the likes of Tekken Tag to Street Fighter EX3 and Rumble Roses, there was plenty of choice when it came to choosing your next game. But like its previous entries, one game that often got overlooked was Bloody Roar 3. On the surface, it was just another run-of-the-mill fighter, but its unique mechanics and setup helped it stand out. Visually, it made the transition to the PlayStation 2 quite well, with very smooth gameplay and each character being adequately textured with very little clipping. The minor details such as eyes, shadows and clothing blowing in the wind are done well, but some of the animations are just horribly awkward. It's nothing that takes away from the gameplay, it's just clear that it needed more time in the oven. On the surface, not much has changed, but one major inclusion is now having the ability to sidestep by default, and this greatly livens up the fighting. Of course, it's all once again built around the concept of transforming into animals and landing some serious hits, but this time around your beast moves can actually be worked into combos, which greatly enhances your options when taking on the opponent. As a beast, you can only stand so much punishment before you must transform back into a human, so choosing when to make the change is just as critical as it always has been. By no means is Bloody Roar 3 one of the best fighting games on the system, but if you're fond of the originals or are simply looking for something different, it does offer up a compelling experience that is bound to tickle the fancy of any fighting veteran. When Nintendo's GameCube first launched, it surprised many players with a little game known as Luigi's Mansion. There was nothing quite like it, especially on the PlayStation 2, and this is where Artoon stepped in to develop what is arguably their take on the ghost hunting genre with Ghost Vibration. As with Luigi's GameCube adventure, you step into a dark and mysterious mansion, but that's where the similarities end. Instead of offering up free exploration, Ghost Vibration instead only allows the player to move in two directions, that being forward and back. It feels like a sort of on-rail shooter at first, but having the ability to backtrack does add a bit of choice when it comes to navigating the environment. The action soon heats up as you encounter one of the many ghosts that haunt the mansion. In order to tackle them, you first switch to a first-person viewpoint and whap out your trusty weapon. It's best described as a sort of harpoon gun that once attached to the ghost, it starts to suck up its energy. But you have to be careful of overheating. If your harpoon overheats, it will detach, and you'll have to wait a bit before being able to attack again, during which time you'll usually be attacked by the ghost itself, who will then flee. To defeat the ghost, you must attack with the harpoon, release, attack again, release again, and so on, making sure not to overheat. Now, it's not overly scary during play, but it's through the several cutscenes scattered throughout the adventure which provide most of the scares. Ghost Vibration is a truly unique game that anyone who's fond of Silent Hill or Resident Evil, for example, will find something to love. If you never got round to it, there's no better time than now. The PlayStation 2 was no stranger to quality first-person shooters, and while Cold Winter didn't revolutionize the genre, with its cinematic storyline and engaging gameplay, it did provide an unforgettable ride from beginning to end. It saw the player jumping into the role of a former MI6 agent known as Andrew Sterling. After being captured by the Chinese, he manages to break out with the help of a former ally and begins to bring those responsible to justice. Unlike many first-person shooters before it, Cold Winter attempts to build an enthralling and thrilling storyline that motivates the player to play through each level. Each piece of dialogue is delivered by talented British voice actors who add drama and realism to many of the situations you'll encounter. Most missions consist of going from point A to B, while the enemy will do anything to stop you. Aside from mowing down the enemy with the machine gun you conveniently stole from the guard you just killed, Sterling will also have to plant explosives, hack into computers, and secure certain locations throughout the campaign. Thankfully, the controls are tight and responsive, which adopts the standard setup of each analog stick being used for running and one for controlling the camera. You've got many tricks up your sleeve, one being a pretty robust crafting system that can see you being able to make useful items out of the everyday crap you'll find lying around. For example, you can create a lockpick as long as you have a pair of wire scissors and a piece of metal. While this is a neat idea, there are very few opportunities where the player will actually need to make an item, which soon begins to feel like a bit of a missed opportunity. Even though it doesn't do much to stand out of the crowd, Cold Winter is still an enjoyable experience that any veteran of the FPS genre will enjoy. When it comes to racing games, the PlayStation 2 was no stranger to incredible experiences. From the likes of the Gran Turismo series to more arcadey options such as Ridge Racer 5, there was a wide range of choice for fans of the sport. But one underrated and largely forgotten game was Infusia Professional Racing. Coming from the complete dickheads over at Konami before they turned to the dark side, it was a compelling and robust racer that rivaled the likes of Gran Turismo, with its spot-on control and solid 60 FPS visuals. Like most racing games, there's a ton of modes to get stuck into, with the most robust being Infusia Life. This mode revolves around skillful driving and not losing Infusia points. It does help to win races, but overall it's more important not to hit anything in doing so. You start your career ranked at 1000, with the point being to make it to number 1. To attain this goal, you must always keep track of the races you enter, the odds of the car you're in, the knowledge of the track you're racing, and ultimately the capabilities of the car you have chosen. When it comes to control, Infusia absolutely shines in this area. It gives Gran Turismo a run for its money, and not only do the cars feel real, but a realistic drifting and power sliding model is implemented as well. Getting used to the vehicles is what this game is all about. Each car you pick has handling that is true to life, and not only are the controls and steering well executed, but the acceleration and braking are spot on as well. Each different class and style of car has its own feel, and that is exactly how racing games should be. If you've exhausted all of the other races on the system, I can fully recommend you try this one out for yourself. As with most games based on movies, it can always be a bit hit and miss. The Punisher began as a comic and eventually found its way to the silver screen, and then landed on the PlayStation 2 as a third-person shooter. The game picks up a while after the movie has ended, with Frank now waging a one-man war against crime, and he's gotten quite a reputation. If you're at all familiar with the Punisher in any form whatsoever, then you know exactly what to expect. Find the bad guy, kill everyone else, then have a fucking beer. When it comes to gameplay, this general concept translates quite well, and in all honesty, this is where the game excels. You've got a dual weapon setup that sees one being assigned to each of the shoulder buttons, and there are a ton of them to utilize, from standard pistols to machine guns and shotguns. Quite frankly, there is just an insane amount of ways to take down enemies. If you're standing and facing an opponent one-on-one, you literally have up to 15 ways in which to end them. Finally, Frank can also use special points throughout the game known as special skills and special interrogations. They allow Frank to quickly kill or terrorize an opponent in a variety of psychotic ways. These points could be used to purchase upgrades to Frank's health as well. You can gain body armor and weapons throughout the game, and smart players are rewarded accordingly for their creativity, though you'll still get points for blindly killing everything around you. Still, it pays to put a little variety into how you blow stuff up anyway. Even though the overall game is quite short, luckily there's a slew of side content and collectible items that help pad out the experience and warrant an extra playthrough for anything you might have missed. Don't let the low scores put you off. The Punisher is one hell of a great time. Gregory Horror Show is without a doubt one of Capcom's best attempts to create a whole new horror game. The story starts off in a sort of eerie way. Basically, you're a child who gets lost in the woods, and you just so happen to stumble into Gregory's hotel. You meet Gregory, the evil, scrawny looking landlord, who has an unhealthy obsession with his guests. Gregory offers you a room to stay in, and you quickly learn that you cannot leave the hotel alive. The only way to do so is to collect the spirits of the guests and return them to the afterlife and personally hand deliver them to the Grim Reaper. Naturally, your task doesn't merely extend to an extra morbid game of hide and seek. These lost souls turn out to be more than lost. They've been stolen by the occupants of the hotel and are being guarded very closely. Every resident has a weakness though, and it's up to you to discover each one and to take advantage of it. Each puzzle-esque scenario is developed to be pretty damn tricky. Although there are only 12 souls you'll need to steal in all, there's plenty of playtime here, from trying to discover these weaknesses alone. Once you do find them and successfully exploit them, it's simply a case of run like hell until you reach the sanctity of your own hotel room. You'll probably have gathered by now that nothing about Gregory Horror Show makes sense, and it's not really meant to. from the cartoon animals who you'll be running away from, to the creepy ass way you need to stalk each guest before they start stalking you. This entire game feels like a very conscious parody of itself. Gregory Horror Show is one of those quirky, off-the-chart insane titles that no one really understood. Every single aspect of the game works exactly as it's intended to, and the originality of the parody horror concept is hilariously well done. The PS2 was a literal goldmine when it came to RPGs. Because of this, many went by well under the radar, with one being known as OK's Shadow King. The most notable aspect of the game has to be its humour that can hardly be taken seriously. The narrative is a real gem and breathed life into a stagnant genre where rebellious citizens toppling evil empires while discovering unrealised magical powers was the norm. You play the part of Eerie, and right at the outset of the adventure you were made to be a demon slave in order to free your sister from a terrible curse. It sounds rather typical, doesn't it? Except that his sister's curse is by no means deadly, but rather your mother is worried she'll grow up to be a comic relief girl instead of a princess. From here on, the jokes don't stop rolling, and the story gets weirder and weirder with each new development, especially when new characters join the party. The characters themselves are interesting, and their compatibility, or lack thereof, serves to propel the plot and induce laughter. Their personalities are almost as interesting as their strange afflictions, but getting into those would be a very cruel spoiler. When it comes to gameplay, like many RPGs before it, Okage takes on a turn-based formula during battles and presents a streamlined and simple system to the player. Naturally, all of your characters have their own abilities and uses during any given situation, and can all be leveled up and further developed by gaining experience. But it's not only battles though, as puzzles manage to play a huge part in the adventure and are bound to test even the most proficient of players. All in all, Okage is a great RPG that deserves your time and is thankfully now available on the PlayStation 4 to make it easier than ever to experience it for yourself. Well, that does it for today's video. Keep an eye out for part 3 as that will be coming up very soon, so don't forget to hit subscribe and tickle that bell. You can follow me on all of the socials to stay up to date on future videos. You can also join our growing community on Discord and meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to our Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Amy, Nano, Steve, Richard, Daniel and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining our Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon to gain access to exclusive videos and giveaways, you'll find the links in the description. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you in the next one.